All right, we'll give it one more minute before we get started. If you're just joining us, feel free to tell us in the chat where you're joining from, and also feel free to turn on your video if you feel comfortable. Okay, great. We are going to go ahead and get started. And started off by saying welcome and thank you so much for joining us today for our January event, which is our UX job market discussion with Heidi Glynn. I'm Nicole. I am the events director for UX research and strategy. I have a few announcements that I'm going to go through, but I want to make sure we have plenty of time to hear from our speakers, so I will make it quick. And make sure you stick around after our panel discussion for some breakout rooms and networking. Like I mentioned before, if you feel comfortable, please turn on your video so we can see your smiling faces. It does make it a little bit easier during these events. So for those of you who this is your first event, I will tell you a little bit about our group. We are UX Research and Strategy, a meetup nonprofit with the mission of helping the global community learn skills related to UX research and strategy while making connections with others around the world. We host free monthly events like this one, and some bonus workshops and some other networking extravaganzas in between as well. Make sure you're following us on all our social media channels so you can stay up to date on what's coming up. We will be posting a link to that in the chat. And also be sure to join our Slack community and introduce yourself so that we can keep this conversation going even after the event is over. Anthony is going to be posting a link to that in the chat as well. For our upcoming event in March, we are going to be celebrating World IA Day with Alexis, who will be talking about building a participatory research practice. So make sure you check that out. You can sign up with the link in the chat for that. And then without further ado, I will be introducing our speaker for tonight, Heidi, who is going to join us and talk about the UX job market. I did want to make a quick note that we had a second panelist. Unfortunately, she's unable to join us, but we're still going to have an amazing discussion, and I'm really excited. So I'm going to start recording, and then we can jump in.
Recording in progress.
Okay. So, all right, let's get started. So our UX job market discussion, and I'm going to introduce you to Heidi so that we can get started. So Heidi is an internal recruiter at User Interviews. She has a background in recruiting and hiring roles within Fortune 500 clients in the tech industry and hiring candidates for UX, UXR, and design roles. She is an empathetic relationship cultivator who enjoys working with candidates to build long-lasting, personalized relationships. Welcome, Heidi, and thank you so much for being here. So we're going to start off with some of the questions that were submitted to us pre-event, and we'll leave some time at the end to take live questions. So be sure you're posting your questions in this Zoom chat here, and someone on our team is going to be monitoring those. And the first thing that we are going to talk about is recruitment. And so let's get to the first question. So can you tell us about the process you take in finding and identifying candidates to proceed with in the hiring process?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Something that I do when I first began the hiring process is I like to connect with the hiring managers just to discuss the role in more depth so that I can really get some insight into the role, learn more about it. And this helps me before I begin reviewing resumes and screening to really have an idea of what the hiring manager is looking for in a candidate. So it helps me to identify candidates who are going to be a good match for that role. Not only do I review the resume, but I also will look at LinkedIn pages. If you have a portfolio or a website, I kind of like to see the whole picture and get a better idea of what your background is and what your experience is. So that's something I personally like to do before I start my screenings.
Awesome, thank you. And I think one kind of follow-up question is, what do you see as or what advice do you have that could really set candidates apart? What's something that when you see a candidate that really stands out?
Something that really can make, you look, well, to have you stand out a little bit more. Just a couple of resume, I guess I'll share some resume tricks that I look for and that help me as a recruiter. It's good to, under the name of the company where you've previously worked or where you're currently working, a nice little resume trick to kind of help you stand out is put a little blurb underneath about that company. What do they do? This is really helpful to recruiters and hiring managers. It gives you just some more ideas of what your background's been, especially if it's at a company name, like one of the big tech companies that really stands out that we all know what they do. It's a really good way to tell your recruiter and hiring managers what it is you did at that company. Another thing that's really good and helpful to stand out is really easy things. Link your LinkedIn page to your resume. Same with your website or your portfolio. It's easy for the recruiter just to click on your links and to review all your information just from your resume in that one document. Another thing that is really good is to list tools that you're really proficient in. If it's a tool you're just started learning, it's okay if you still want to list it, but just maybe call out on your resume or even when you're having your screening with the recruiter that you're just learning this tool. I think being honest and upfront about it in the beginning is the best way to be, and it doesn't hurt you to tell someone that you're trying to learn and grow in that tool or that skill. It's just good to let them know that maybe you don't have the 2 years experience, but you're looking to learn from that.
Awesome, thank you, super helpful. So I'm going to move on to our next question, and we would love to know, when you're talking with a candidate, what are some things that you're looking for that might not be on their resume?
Something I look for that usually isn't always on resumes, I like to do a deeper dive into learning more about candidate soft skills. I think soft skills are overlooked, and I think that they're extremely important, especially in the UX and the research world. I think it tells a lot about people's backgrounds, their experience. not only do I ask them what their top soft skills are in their day-to-day, it doesn't even have to be with their work experience. It could also be, what's your experience, or what do you do best in your day-to-day? And I ask for examples of that, because maybe someone's a mom or a dad, and maybe they're really good at time management. That can easily correlate to the role that we're speaking of, and you don't even have to really go into details about it. Like, as a recruiter, I will take that information and use that to my benefit. And oftentimes I take that information about the soft skills and I include it in my summaries to the hiring managers to give a little more idea about people's backgrounds and what they are really strong at.
I love that. I think soft skills are a super important thing that aren't always the easiest to share on paper, but definitely come across, in conversation. And I think that's a really great point about bringing that up. So sort of as a follow-up, what would you say are some do's and don'ts for candidates that they should be talking about when you're having these conversations?
Do's or don'ts? I would say, do you mean as far as like if there was a negative experience they encountered, or?
Yeah, exactly. That was actually like kind of part two of the question is how would you recommend, or how do you suggest that a candidate could talk about a negative experience?
So I think that talking about a negative experience, what you can do is, it's okay to talk about that experience. It doesn't look bad on your part or anyone's part. I think that you find a silver lining from those experiences and you learn and grow from them. So maybe you take that experience that you had, whether it was a bad encounter with a manager or team, something that took place, but you learn about what from that difficult moment you could take to better yourself, or maybe it's something that you want to find a role that is important to you. So maybe your current company doesn't have these aspects of what you're looking for, and you can take that and you can learn from it and learn that about yourself, that you want this from your next company. So I try to take the bad experiences and find the good in them somehow, so you can grow and learn from it.
Great. There's always a silver lining. It's just about finding it, right? Okay.
And sometimes you don't know it until after it takes place.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So now we're going to talk specifically a little bit more about resumes and portfolios. So what are some common mistakes or red flags that you see when you're looking through resumes?
I'd say the biggest and common mistake, it's, I don't know, I think the biggest one I see oftentimes is maybe poor spelling and grammar. I know that sounds really easy. I know these are the basics, but sometimes I think, not that you do it on purpose, but you're just in a hurry. I'm a big believer in always double checking and triple checking, whether it's your resume, your email. I know, and on our team at User Interviews, my team, we are constantly like having each other review each other's work before we blast it out to the company. It's just really important to have an extra set of eyes on it. So even after you double check or triple check your own resume, have a family member or a friend look it over too. They might be able to give you some insight into it as well, that you, after staring at it for hours, didn't see.
Absolutely. Always helpful to have that second set of eyes and just make sure. Sometimes when you're looking at something for so long, you miss something. So having a friend or, someone else take a look, a mentor even, definitely helps a lot. And I think one thing, I guess kind of as a follow-up to that too. So what's something that might make you move on to the next candidate versus, or what's something that you would see on a resume that you might not, move forward with that candidate?
I think that it depends, but I think if you are more junior or entry in your level of a role, I think it is really important to pay attention to the roles you're applying to. Like, if you're just starting out, you don't want to apply to a role that's asking for at least 6+ years experience. that is something that is going to cause us to move along because, hiring managers are looking for specific skill sets for at these certain levels of roles that they're hiring for. So I would say that, but on the other hand, I don't think that it's a bad thing if you are more senior in your role and if you're trying to get into a new field like UX, you might have to start out more entry. And to me, I think that is completely okay. I just think the candidate has to know and understand that by doing so, you will probably have to take a little bit of a pay cut and title change, and you just have to be okay with that because, that's important that you are upfront about that with the recruiter from the very first initial stage of hiring.
I think that's great. And that really transitions well to our next question, which is, if you are transitioning to another field, which I know a lot of people are currently in this situation, how can someone in that situation make their previous experience relevant to the role that they're applying for?
Yeah, so this is a trickier question. Definitely, I've given some thought to it, but it is a little difficult. I do think, though, what you can do is pay attention in job postings, pay attention to keywords. I know that's something you probably hear a lot when you're job searching, but find those keywords or those certain things that really do relate to what your current experience or your past experience has been, and find a way to express that and explain the why that relates to you in your current role and how you could bring that into your new role, whether you're transitioning to UX or marketing, anything that you're transitioning into. For example, I'll use myself. Since I recruit, I've actually learned this over the last couple of years recruiting. A lot of recruiters have this transition where they could go into a sales role. There's that weird, I feel like I'm recruiting people and learning about them, but people are making sales, and it's just a different type of product, right? But there's a very good correlation between the two things. So you just have to find those insights that can really try to help you stand out. Sorry, this is a harder question. I've been thinking about this one all day. I think too, if you're currently at a company though, and you're not in UX or UX research, but they do offer it, a great thing to do is to maybe meet up with people from that team and get to learn a little bit more about the role with them. Ask them to have coffee, try to learn more about the role and how you could break in. And maybe you take a role on that team within the same company if something opens up, and maybe it's more entry level, but it would break you into it. And the bonus would be you'd always already know the product and the organization and the culture of the company. So I know that doesn't go for everyone, but if you are in a position to do that, I think that's a great way to transition.
I really love that advice. And I think that the kind of more indirect casual networking can really go a long way, and getting to know people on a personal level, and then seeing, where that takes you. I think that's a super important and really helpful advice. Okay. And so our next question is, there has been some debate about whether UX researchers specifically need portfolios. So we would love to hear your thoughts on UX research portfolios.
Well, I didn't know this was such a big debate, but don't be mad at me, those of you who disagree, but I do think they are good to have. I think it's just an added bonus to your resume to even glorify more what your experience is. I think having a website or a portfolio is an incredibly strong way of showing hiring managers your thought process, your work, that, what were your goals? What were the backgrounds and the challenges and the methods you used? What impacted your findings? What could you have done differently? I think it just does a deeper dive into your work, and it's just another way to really show off everything you've done. So I do lean on that side that they are good to have.
Awesome. And I think too, if you could share a little bit of insight in terms of what you're looking for, or what recruiters in general are kind of looking for when they are looking at portfolios?
Absolutely. So it depends. Again, something I do, just background on how I look at portfolios. I'm usually in the recruiting and hiring process, the first person is the recruiter is the first person to review portfolios. When I'm having those conversations with hiring managers, if they have other people on their team who have similar portfolios, something I do ask for is to see an example of them so that I can compare when I'm looking at candidates to see where they are the same. It really helps me in my process. But yeah, I like to have, it's a great tool for me as a recruiter to focus on the must-haves in portfolios and what they're looking for. So I think it depends on what type, if we're talking about UX design, if we're talking about UX research, what you're going to have in your portfolio. I know this is kind of leading into the next question, but user interviews were the company I work at. We have a blog, and there actually was a really great link I found on there while researching this question. I'm happy to share it in the Zoom link. It actually is a great blog post about the kind of information you should include in your UX research portfolio. So if you're okay with it, I'll share it in there after I'm done.
Yeah, absolutely. We love resources, and we do usually post the chat and share resources after the event. So anything that you can share is always welcome.
Okay, I'll put that in there. It just kind of goes over to, like, it's a good idea to, include your research process and toolbox, collaborating with key stakeholders, explaining the why you did certain decisions on your project. So I'll post the whole thing in there after we're done with our discussion.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. And I think too, I know we already started kind of talking about what kind of information, and we can go a little bit deeper into that the next question. But before I do move on to that, I think if you could just share kind of at what stage do portfolios get reviewed within the interview process?
Yeah, it starts with the recruiter. Again, that's why I like to ask hiring managers if they have examples or if they have specifics they can really, explain to me with what they're looking for. I enjoy looking at portfolios. I think I learn a lot about a candidate by looking at them. I take my reviewing of portfolios and resumes into consideration before I even screen, so I can learn a little bit more about the projects and work that candidates have worked on.
That's great. Thank you so much. Okay, and so I guess I know you already started kind of to touch on this, and what kind of information should be included. So I guess to be a little more specific, is there kind of a gauge or number in terms of how many projects should be included in a portfolio?
I don't think there's a number. I think you want your portfolios to always be clean. So I don't think you want to have an overabundance of projects on there. I would say, if you have a couple in the works that aren't complete, it's of course okay to have on there like coming soon, but maybe you don't want to have more than one or two of those. It's always good to have, I would say 3 to 4 projects is a good number from start to finish.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean that's usually around the number that is kind of floating out there. I think 3 is a good aim, and to kind of go from there. Any other advice that you have specific to portfolios?
Nothing other than I just think, honestly, show your work off. I think they're great. I think as a recruiter, I enjoy looking at them. I think a resume, of course, is a wonderful tool. We all need them. LinkedIn as well. Something I would like to say, though, that I have noticed as a recruiter is if you're comfortable with it, I often notice that not a lot of candidates, when I'm doing passive sourcing on LinkedIn Recruiter, include their portfolios in their LinkedIn profiles. I think it's a really good idea to do so. I think it's just another way for when if a recruiter's passively sourcing, if you're if your portfolio is in there, and like I talked about earlier, I have an example I'm looking for and yours is a match, I'm going to reach out to you and, see if you want to move forward and, learn more about our role. So just another tip, don't feel like you have to, but just my own advice.
I think that's very valuable advice. So include your portfolio in your LinkedIn profile.
Yes.
Okay. So now we're going to, we'll move on to the next question here. And talk a little bit more about like transitioning sort of. So I guess, what are some concerns that exist when you are hiring people who are new to the UX research field?
I would say, let's think about this. Concerns that exist with hiring people who are new to the UX research field. I don't know if I would say what my concerns are. I would just say, I think that, you just want to, I don't know, Nicole, you might stump me on this one. Let me think about this for a second.
Okay. So let me look at some of these other kind of follow-up questions to see if we can.
Yeah, let me come back to that one. Let me think about that.
Okay, perfect. So you know what? I'll actually skip to the next one, and I think this could help help bring it back to that. So let me move on to this next one here, and any advice that you can share on how to break into UX.
Yes. This one, I think something that, is going to be some good advice for everyone is, I think when we think of UX, not all of us, but many think of tech. And I think that a great thing to do is, if you're looking to break into UX right now, is just look everywhere. Don't just keep yourself in the tech field. Companies all over, all different industries hire for UX research. And, when you're searching for a role, especially if you're just trying to break into it right now, I think get that experience where you can, and, and then grow your resume and your experience. And if tech, or if there's a specific company you have in mind that you really want to break into one day, get that experience on your resume and learn and grow, and then go for it. Because I don't know, when I'm on LinkedIn, or even I'm just doing a search, with who's hiring for what to try to help other people, there's a lot of industries hiring for UX right now that you wouldn't even think, like grocery, retail, healthcare. There's just so many different industries you could break into right now. So, don't just put yourself in one box, like really look at everything that's out there.
I think that's really great advice, and sort of keeping your options open. Make sure you're looking, kind of across the board, and not limiting yourself to one thing. I think that's super helpful. So our next question here is, what are some things you do that kind of humanize this whole recruitment process?
So I love humanizing experiences. Like I am not a recruiter who is ever going to just do a Q&A session. Nicole and I were actually talking about this earlier. I actually start every conversation off with, this is just going to be a relaxed conversation. Let's try to get to know each other. Usually my first question is about, where do you live? And I, cliche and cheesy as it is, usually ask about what the weather's like where they're at currently. And then that leads into, oftentimes, if the candidate has kids, or if they're just graduated. I like to take the time to really get to know someone. And then I believe in being fully transparent and honest. So, if I'm speaking to a candidate, maybe after our conversation's coming to an end, if it's not a perfect match, and I know that maybe they're too junior, or this isn't the right role right now, I like to continue the conversation and keep in touch, because you never know when another role might open up, and it's good to keep that open communication. I also like to be really open and honest with candidates about, we discuss salary. I think that's an important thing to discuss from the very first initial call with a recruiter. You don't want to get through 4 to 5 rounds of a interview and not know what the salary band or range is, because if it's not what you're looking for and you get all the way to the end, you'll have just wasted your time and the company's time. So it's good to have those salary discussions in the very first call with your recruiter. And then I like to also give candidates complete insight into what our interview process is going to look like. If they, after the hiring manager reviews their resume, I tell them, what are the 3, different rounds of interviews and what the length of them will be, and just, keep in touch with them. If they have any questions, they can always follow up with me after.
That's great. We love the transparency and the honesty, and I think I do really think it goes such a long way. And so I'm very happy to hear that, and happy that that's something that you incorporate in the recruitment process and the hiring process.
Yeah, it's important.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, we are all humans, so very, very important to keep that. So I am actually we've gotten some really amazing questions in the chat here. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. That kind of comes to the end of some of the pre-event questions that we had posted from you all. So let me stop sharing my screen, and then we're going to jump into answering some of the questions that were posted live in the chat. So just give me a second here. And let me pull those questions up.
I was just going to say Lily Rose.
Nigga boy.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, everyone. That was not meant to happen. Okay, so let me jump into questions now. And I would love to start off with this one. What reasons would you hire a less experienced candidate versus a more experienced candidate? Kind of, besides just based on what the budget is for that role.
Can you say it one more time? Why would I hire a less experienced?
Yeah. What reasons would you hire a less experienced candidate versus a more experienced one?
I think that sometimes it's good to take. I believe that anyone can grow in a role. I think that someone who is, looking to start off in a new role and they may not have as much experience, they might be more willing to really put in that time and to, take on more. I don't want to say take on more, but they're really going to be interested in learning and growing in that role. So I am a big believer in doing that, actually. So I think there's a lot of reasons, but I think that you don't necessarily have to have the number of years of experience to be good at taking on a role.
Great. Okay, I'm going to go back into, we had some questions that came up,
Shut up.
specifically about resumes. And so I think one question that kind of comes up a lot is, how important is it to keep your resume to one page? Let's say you have a really long job history. Is it better to include all of that and have it more than one page, or is kind of rule of thumb stick to one page?
No, I think that, I think 2 pages is absolutely acceptable. I think most people are going to get to having 2 pages, especially as you grow in your career. If you don't have to have unnecessary experience on there, like, don't add it, but don't feel like you're limited to just having 1 page. That's not something that you necessarily need to do.
Right. I think that is, definitely a question that we hear a lot, and a question that people ask a lot in terms of kind of what to do with that. So I think that's great. I think on the same kind of note, how important are cover letters?
Oh,
Another favorite question. I'm sure that you get asked this a lot.
this is my own opinion, and there might be many recruiters who don't agree with me, but I don't like cover letters. I think they're unnecessary. I think that if you want to write one, I do read them. I just don't think that I think we're past those days where they should be required. I think if you want to include one, sometimes it is a good way to explain, like, for example, if you are pivoting in from a different background, I think that it's a great place to give a little more explanation, why and what you're trying to do. But no, I do not believe that they should be required. I think only if you want to include one, but don't feel like you have to. I know at user interviews, we do not require them.
That's great. And I think, refreshing to hear. For sure.
Others might disagree with me, but that's my own personal opinion.
Yeah, I do think it does come down to preference sometimes, and sometimes it's required and you should include it. And if it's not, I think it's up to you. And it's part of why we wanted to have you here, just to hear your opinion and how what you do in your day to day. So appreciate
Absolutely.
the insight. Another question that came up was, are there any resources or places you would recommend for candidates to look for job postings, UXR positions specifically, or just in general, some resources that you can share to look for jobs?
Yeah, let's see. I mean, if you're looking for roles in tech, there is a great website called Built In. They have a lot of tech jobs, startups. I believe it's builton.com. I'll look that up and I can send that to you after. But even if you go on LinkedIn and you search, for specific roles, LinkedIn is a great tool. Another great thing to do is, if there's a company or an industry you're interested in, to use LinkedIn as your tool, go through your network to see if anyone is connected to someone who works at one of those companies. It's a great way to network and learn if there is a job opening, and maybe figure out a way to get to know someone there who might be connected to someone you already know.
That's great. I think the networking piece of it is always really important. So I'm glad that you have touched on that throughout, and that it is something that comes up, that continues to come up. The next question that we got was, what do you do if UX research is in your role but not in your title? How do you sort of list something like that on your resume? So you have the experience, you've done the work, but you aren't necessarily sitting under that title. So how do you put that in your resume so it comes across?
Yeah, I think just explain in your resume what you did. So if you were a part of user surveys, or if whatever it is you did, explain it in your resume. I actually worked with a candidate a couple of years ago. She was in a similar situation. She wanted a specific role, and people weren't taking her seriously about it. So we just kind of worked together to figure out how she could really show those skills off from her other roles. And I think if you really highlight them in your resume and explain as best you can, again, use the keywords from the job description to tie in what you did within research or UX, whatever it is, the role you're going for, how that comes across, and explain in your screening with the recruiter, like call it out even more. Or if you don't want to send a cover letter, don't. But if you do, and there's a way to call it out through a cover letter, even if it's just a quick paragraph explaining those details, I think that's an instance where a cover letter might be helpful.
That's great. And I think another sort of a little bit more specific question in terms of what to include and what not to include. Let's say you've worked on, and this is more about portfolios. So if you have projects for maybe grad school, is that something that you should include in a portfolio? If they've taught you research but are not UX specific.
Yeah, I think so. I think if your portfolio maybe doesn't have as many other examples either, I think you absolutely should include those projects. I see that oftentimes, and I think too, if someone doesn't have as much research experience or UX design experience, sometimes it's a good thing to do projects on the side yourself. Maybe things that don't relate to your current job, and add those projects to your resume. I think anything you can do to show off your work, whether it's through a job or just a project-based thing or through school, is a good thing. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
To make sure I'm not going off topic here.
No, you're good. I think, people are always going to have kind of more specific questions about how it specifically relates to them. And so this is all just kind of, general advice that the majority of us can hopefully take and apply to our situations. So,
Okay.
Yeah, all good. Another question that we got in the chat was, what is the best way to communicate with recruiters if you currently have a job and you're looking for new opportunities, but you don't want your current employer to know that you're looking for new opportunities?
Yeah, so if I'm going to go back to LinkedIn because I think it's a really good tool. There is something you can do on LinkedIn. You can turn your open to work on. There will be an option for you to put your green banner on or not to. You're going to want to make sure you don't turn your green banner on, but that will notify other recruiters at different companies that you are open to work when we're doing passive sourcing on LinkedIn through LinkedIn Recruiter. But the good thing is it does not allow for anyone at your company, including recruiters, HR, to know that you're looking elsewhere. So it's a great way to, even if you're not seriously looking, but you're just interested to see what's out there, to see if a recruiter might reach out to you. It's a good way just to kind of, see what's out there on the job market.
And then I think it's sort of a follow-up question, aside from that on LinkedIn, is there any other advice or tips you have on how someone can get in touch with a recruiter? Yeah,
just reach out. I mean, in defense of all of us recruiters, everyone is different, but I tried to get back to people. If you message me on LinkedIn, I know I fall behind a lot of times, and I always apologize when I did this actually last night. I was responding to messages in my inbox that I hadn't been able to get to for quite a while. I always feel bad, but when you're working full time, sometimes your inbox gets full in LinkedIn. By the time I'm ready, I'm a mom, so by the time I take care of my kids and everything else, sometimes I am just burned out by the end of the day. But yeah, reach out. It never hurts. The worst that's going to happen is you're not going to hear back from someone, and that's not going to change what your current situation is. But I do my very best due diligence to get back to everyone. You can always even reach out. If you applied for a role, sometimes candidates will follow up with an email to my work account just to say, I'm interested in this role. I just wanted to let you know I applied. It never hurts. I think it's always good to, again, if nothing else, it's good to network and reach out and connect with people.
That's great. Again, the back to the we are all human, so it doesn't hurt to send a follow up if you haven't heard from someone. And we're all going through it. I think one other question that we got that I think was a really great one is, if you can give kind of an example, what is a regular process? Like, what does the regular hiring process look like? How many interviews? What are kind of the steps that a candidate would go through? Obviously speaking general again, but a typical process for hiring. Are there whiteboard challenges, number of interviews, portfolio review, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think it depends on the level of the role. I think that's going to change how many steps there are. But just for a generalized idea, we usually do, a 20 to 30 minute recruiting screen with a candidate. Then, next step might be a half hour to 45-minute call with the hiring manager. From there, you might do a team interview where you meet with some of the members from the team that you'd be working with. And then I would say final would probably be maybe you meet with someone from leadership, or maybe the hiring manager again with somebody from leadership. So I would say typical, if you don't count the recruiter screen, because I don't really count that as an interview, it's more of a get to know you and learn about the company call. I'd say typically 3 to 4 rounds, anywhere from a half hour to 45 minutes per round. Again, it depends on the role, though, if it's more senior level or how detailed it is.
Thank you. I think that's super helpful, just to kind of give everyone a little bit of a sense of, what the process looks like, and, letting people have a better understanding of what to expect. So those were kind of some of the highlight questions, top questions. I know we got a lot on the same kind of note. So I think just as sort of a wrap up and final question, I would love to ask you, any last piece of advice, or maybe there's something we didn't touch on today that you think would be super helpful, just in terms of advice for people who are currently in the job market.
Yeah, I would say just keep your, resumes, your portfolios, your LinkedIn pages, keep everything updated. If you take new courses or if you learn new skill sets, make sure you add those as you're, searching for your new role. I think it's important to really make those things shine and stand out, that you are, taking the initiative to learn these things if you are taking courses. And job searching is like a full-time job in itself. So give yourself some grace, and it's a lot of work. And if you get asked to do interviews, take them. Even if it's maybe not the job of your dreams, you might realize going through the process, if you keep moving through it, that, maybe this is more along the lines of what I was looking for and I didn't realize it. Or maybe it's a job you really wanted, but you didn't get it. Taking any interview, in my opinion, is good practice, even if you don't get the job, because it's just preparing you and setting you up to do really well at the job that you're going to land. So take the interviews, and I know it's a lot of work, but it's really good practice, and it's just going to prep you even more for every single one that you have.
I think that's really great advice, and give yourself grace, super important, and taking interviews as using them as prep. And I think one last question too is kind of, what's something that you do in your personal life? You're talking to a lot of candidates and, seeing a lot of resumes, portfolios, whatnot, but what's something that you do that kind of gives you a chance to reset, or gives you a little bit of that break that you need? Like how do you sort of, give yourself a break too?
Oh, it's a good question. Well, right now, my kids, I am very involved with my husband and I. My daughter's in travel volleyball, so we've been going to tournaments, and that's really fun to watch. I love to read, so at night I read a lot of times to clear my mind before I go to bed. And I'm being really honest, I like to binge different shows. on all the good streaming channels. But no, and just spending time with friends and, you know, I'm a social person, so I think it's important to spend time with family and friends too outside of work.
That's great. Thank you so much. That really appreciate it. So that kind of, wraps up our discussion. We are going to go ahead and jump into our networking portion. And I just wanted to say thank you so much to Heidi. This was really great, super useful information. I hope everyone, if you can't stay for networking, I hope that you found this session helpful, informative, got some good tips and some good resources. And